Hello everybody, a new build for the Necromancer Beta is online. It's build 45704, and for the rest of our feedback videos coming up here, it's going to be all based on this build, but I need some time to test it. But there were a lot of changes in this build that are really freaking good, and let's start with the skills. We're just going to briefly go over all the changes so that way we know what we're talking about when we do the feedback videos on the rest of the sets. So skills, the first thing that was changed, Bone Prison. It now has a 30% chance to trap enemies. Used to be a 10% chance to trap. They improved Bone Spear, by the way, and now tracks enemies better. You can see that the animation isn't any different. I still have my qualms about that. We'll talk about that when we get to that Pestilence set video. But with that said, it does apparently track enemies, so that way when you start at a moving enemy, it's not just going to whiz by them, which means that it should feel a little bit better, but we'll see if that changes anything. Command Skeletons, the poison rune on it, it got a pretty massive increase in damage. It used to be 80% to it's now 215% of damage that it does, and I think that that's pretty good because you're sacrificing your skeletons when you use it, so it better do some pretty good damage. Corpse Explosion went from 250% damage to 300%, or 350% damage, so that got buffed. Corpse Lance went from 900% damage to 1750% damage, and the attack speed of it was increased. And then finally, the Skeletal Mage, the poison rune on it, which we all know from having a pretty cheesy effect on it, has been nerfed by a little bit. It was 175%. You can see it is now 100%. As for passives, there's just some minor changes to Blood for Blood. Used to be a 3-stack, which you can see here now stacks 10 times. Dark Reaping, which is when you have a scythe, gain 2% essence and life per kill, used to be 1%. And then finally, the Serration. Bone Spikes, Bone Spear, and Bone Spirit till 1% increased damage for every 1.5 yards from you to the enemy. But the thing is, it used to only go up to a maximum of 15%, now it goes to 20%, which that will be nice in combination with Bone Prison and with Bone Spear and with the Bone Spear set, which is the Pestilence set. You'll see why when we get to the rings. Now let's go over items real quick. So I like to say that a lot of our feedback that we had on the sets and the items actually made it in, and clever changes were made to these items. So this item that I thought was fairly underrated, but I really liked, got a change. It has now the added effect of the damage you do to cursed enemies is increased, essentially. And it's worded weird there. It says you have 100% chance to apply a curse and you deal 200% increased damage to cursed enemies. It could just say, I don't know. I don't know how you would phrase that differently, but because I'm dyslexic, it reads really funny to me. But it goes up to a 200%, which is really awesome. I have a bad roll on mine, but that's how it works. But I actually really like this effect because it was a cool weapon before, and now it's a useful weapon now. Then the second item, the Bone Spear item, got a pretty big increase. It used to go up to 150%, and you can see now it goes up to 450%, which is a pretty big increase. Then you have this one now. This read weird before. Apparently it listed 125 to 150% on the Bloodside Blade, but that's not what it was supposed to be. It was actually 15 to 20%, and now it is 20 to 30%, so that got a bit of a buff. The Shadow Hook. This one is interesting. It's just a bit different. So it used to be that Bone Spikes generates additional essence, but now it is also that every point of maximum essence increases your damage by 0.5%. It's weird, but we'll see how that ends up working. I think that's a little weak, especially compared to some of these other items that are better. This one got a different name. It used to be Death Scythe. Now it's Naegir's Black Death. And it got nerfed a bit, which I think is needed because it went up to 100% before. Now it only goes up to 65%. It was too good. We mentioned that in our feedback, and now it's, I think it's about average with the rest of the weapons. The Iron Rose is now attacking with Siphon Blood, has a 49, which goes up to 50% chance to cast a free Blood Nova. It was way lower before. It was like 15% chance, or 25% chance, I think is when it, so they essentially doubled it. That'll be really nice with that blood set. We'll get to that in a moment. Then you have this new neck, or it's the old neck, but it has a way different effect. It used to be way different. It used to be that every corpse consumed in the Land of the Dead increased your damage by 10% for 10 seconds after it ended. So you can get up to like 200 and something percent. Now it's each corpse consumed in Land of the Dead grants a stack of macabre knowledge, which increases the damage of Corpse Lance and Corpse Explosion by 200% while outside of the Land of the Dead. And there doesn't appear to be a timed effect on that, which is really cool. I like that a lot. And I think that that will make a Corpse Lance and a Corpse Explosion build way more viable. They changed Dainty's binding. It's just generally a lot better. It used to be that Decrepify gains an additional 20 to 30% damage reduction on attacks against you, but it is now you gain 50% damage reduction if there is an enemy affected by your Decrepify. We said that the item before wasn't good enough. Now it definitely is. And that gives us some well-needed damage reduction. This chest piece now says that Devour restores an additional 100%. It goes up to, I don't know why that number's green, but go with it. Essence and life. In addition, when Devour restores essence or life above your maximum, the excess is granted over 3 seconds. It used to just be that secondary effect there, but now it is both, and that's pretty good. They changed Fate's Vow. Used to be when you consume enough corpses, you release a Death Nova. Now it's Army of the Dead gains the effect of the Unconventional Warfare rune, which used to be on this weapon set. It is now on this helm. Then these gauntlets, your golem sheds a corpse every second. Used to be your golem had a chance to shed a corpse when it was hit, but the thing is that it never really got hit enough to make it worth it. And now that it's just shedding one every second, it's quite a bit better. Probably good for a Corpse Explosion or Corpse Lance build. I'm thinking we'll have to mess around with that. These breaches, your golem's damage is increased, which that was the effect before, but now it is, and you gain 30% less damage while it is active. It used to be you gain like 25% damage reduction within a certain, if you were within a certain distance of it. So that's a bit more damage reduction, which is always good. This one has been changed. The percentage has been increased fairly significantly. It is now Bone Spikes has a 30% chance to cast a free Bone Nova at the target location. Used to go up to 15% chance. This ring got changed. I find it very interesting that this ring got changed, but it used to be that Bone Spikes, Bone Spear, and Bone Spirit did 150% increased damage to enemies that are stunned, frozen, charmed, feared, or blinded. It is now you deal 75 to 100% increased damage against slowed enemies, or triple that bonus against enemies afflicted by any other type of impairing effect. Remember what I talked about earlier with that bone prison? Now that that's a 30% chance to trap enemies, that actually does count for that triple effect. So that will be really good. And of course that stacks with the Serration damage as well. So I think that Pestilence set is going to become really, really good with this build. And then the final piece of armor that got changed that isn't a set is this. Its Corpse Lance damage is increased by 30% for, I think it goes up to, 30% for 3 seconds when you consume a corpse. Used to be max 15 stacks. It is now max 20 stacks. And the previous percentage was only up to 20%. So again, Corpse Lance is going to be pretty good, especially the fact that the base rune got a huge damage increase. And then this is fascinating. This used to give the effect that this helm now does, which gave Army of the Dead Unconventional Warfare. It is now, when a target of your command skeletons dies, your skeletons are automatically commanded to attack a nearby target. So it reduces some of the micromanagement needed with the command skeletons, which is good because it was a little much, especially when you were just blowing through enemies. And now there's another effect. It's when your skeletons are commanded to attack a target, all your minions deal 400% increased damage. Whew, that's what I'm talking about. Now that is a weapon for a pet necromancer. That is awesome. I love it. It's really good, and I can't wait to try it out with the pet set. Speaking of the sets, let's get into them. Rasmus Set got changed. It's the 6-piece bonus. Used to only go up to 200% increased damage. It's now 250% increased damage for every skeletal mage out for Army of the Dead. That's really good. I like that a lot because it may seem like it's a small percentage increase, but it does give you enough to make up for the fact that they nerfed the skeletal mage rune before. The new Pestilence set, they reverted their change from making Corpse Lance shoot a Corpse Fragment, and now it continues to shoot Corpse Lances, which means it's affected by your rune. The 4-set bonus isn't any different, and the 6-set bonus is significantly different in the fact that it used to be... I think it was 1,000% damage. Now it's 3,000% damage. And that empowered Bone Spear charge used to only go up to 30 stacks. Now it goes up to 100 stacks. That's a pretty significant increase in damage. I like that. Again, that Corpse Lance and Corpse Explosion build looking pretty good. Bone Spear still feels lame to throw, but we'll see how the damage works on that. And then the final set, well, I guess not the final set because this got changed too. We'll talk about the Saint set in a second, but this is the most significant change of the sets, which the 6-set bonus before was really interesting, but it gave you a very specific playstyle. Now this is going to be very different. The old one was spending 10% life grants you a stack of Blood Crusade or Cascade, up to 50 times. Each stack increases damage of your life spending attacks by 200% and increase the life you lose by 10% using a heal which consume a stack and heal for an additional 300%. Right, so that's how it worked before. Now it is just your life spending attacks deal 3,300% increased damage but cost twice as much life, and your healing from skills is increased by 100%. The reason this, I think, is a lot better is because it's a little bit more open. It doesn't mean that you have to micromanage a stack, which means that you're actually a lot more free to take things such as this passive, this Blood for Blood passive, because before you didn't want to take that passive because it wouldn't actually give you a stack because you weren't using a life spending attack because the life was refunded on it. So it is interesting that all should work a little bit better together. I found that to be the most exciting set of that previous patch, and I'm kind of excited to see what kind of damage this does now, because, it's pretty cool. We'll see how it plays out in the end. And then one of our main feedbacks before for the Inarius set, the Saint set, the old Saint set, was that the Swirling Tornado of Bone didn't ever feel like it was doing anything. They increased the damage from the 350% to 750%. That should be a bit better. We'll see if that does much. It also no longer does physical damage, it just does damage. So that probably means that it will go off of whatever rune you're using on bone armor, which is tends to be the case for most sets that no longer use like a physical damage. If it doesn't say it typically uses whatever either your highest is or whatever rune you're using on that ability. So that should be fairly interesting. Oh, by the way, the secondary damage went up from 850% to 2750%, which is pretty good. Other than that, that's all the changes. So there's just across the board, what we're seeing is much more damage and much more flexibility with what items we can take. A lot of the damage reduction stuff was tweaked a bit, so that way it's going to be a bit better. Dainty's binding is pretty much necessary now. Where before it was kind of like, it's not good enough. Now it definitely is. It's certainly better than it used to be, but in the way that is a little bit more useful, because before it was like you had to have had that target cursed for the damage reduction to be on it, where now it's just as long as you have a target curse, that damage reduction is there. So you're not having to micromanage your curses, which means you're not having to like spam them out. You just need to really throw one down, and then you're pretty much good, but it'd probably be better to hit as many as you can, so that way you're also gaining the damage reduction from Decrepify. I don't know, it'll be interesting. I think first matter of business is testing out these sets, seeing how the new damage on works, seeing how Bone Spear will work with the new damage stuff, testing out the new functionality of the Tragouls, and obviously testing out a pretty sick pet set for Rasmus. But those were all the changes, and I gotta spend a lot of time with these sets because I think that this is going to be well, this is certainly one of the most interesting patches because of all the damage upgrades to stuff and the changes with all the interactions between things and having certain passive switched. It's going to be weird, so it's going to take a little bit of time to get these videos out, but I think that this is definitely all headed in the right direction, and I really like what they've changed here. So with that being said, we shall see you guys next time.